I'm Christy
Hi.
Graham, and welcome to Acorn Counseling Asks. Today, instead of asking attorneys about stuff, I thought I would ask my good friend Chris Mann about human trafficking and sexual sex trafficking because she is the executive director of Refuge for Women. I've worked as a contractor for Refuge for Women for a couple of years. I love working with these ladies. I love working with this program. But you might wonder why a play therapist is working with people who've been exploited. And I will tell you, Chris is going to explain some of the ways that that works. But basically, play therapy is a preventative measure, and it helps parents and families to keep their children with really good skills and all kinds of things to keep them safer, not safe. We're getting safer. And Chris is going to help us kind of learn what are some of the things that she sees in the women that she works with and through her education and training. All right, Chris, thank you so much for coming and agreeing to come on this day. And it's Human Trafficking Month, which means that we really want to be aware of what is happening. So
Yeah,
share.
you wore your blue. I should have worn blue. That's the color that we're supposed to be wearing for Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yes,
I
it
should have
is.
done it.
I got the teal for C7 Human Trafficking Coalition, which is one of the places that I volunteer at and where I met Refuge for Women for the first time. So, Chris, tell me kind of what are some of the basics that you want people to know, especially parents of both young children and adolescents, about human trafficking?
Well, it looks different, I think, than everyone really believes how it looks. I think everyone kind of perceives this as we just need to teach our children about stranger danger, that we need to teach our children to not talk to strangers or go to the white van that's driving down the street or, don't answer the door or whatever. But really, most trafficking happens. Most victims are victimized by someone they know, that they're groomed at a young age by someone they know. And that could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be an uncle, a teacher, a coach. I mean, virtually anybody that has access to our children could possibly be someone that's grooming them for exploitation. And I forgot the question.
No, you're doing great.
Just
You're
in
doing
general, what it looks like.
just in
But
general what
yeah,
it looks like.
I
Yeah.
mean, I just think that's the biggest misconception is that, and movies portray it that way. And so it's not a surprise that we think about it in those terms. There aren't movies out there about the neighbor exploiting the kid next door. And that happens a lot, honestly. And
So,
so oh,
what do parents do to help their children? Um,
yeah, I was just going to go there.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
because that's where we
what do
got
we
to
do?
go.
How do we prevent it? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, everything's 100% preventable, obviously. But I would say that a relationship with your child is the biggest preventative measure for something like that. Because if you have a good relationship with your child, you have good communication, and you're teaching your child healthy boundaries and all of those types of things, um, they're going to be able to talk to their parents immediately if something like that happens. If someone approaches them and they're uncomfortable, they're going to be able to say, Mom, Dad, oh my gosh, Joe next door, sorry to every Joe that's watching this, but the guy next door just asked me if I wanted to look at pictures or whatever, whatever it is. What if I wanted to watch a movie with him? And, and then mom and dad can respond in a healthy way and work through those things. And so really it's good communication and healthy relationships and boundaries, teaching your child boundaries.
Be more clear about what boundaries you're talking about. Kind of help me understand what are some of the ladies coming back saying that when they were children, what kinds of boundaries did they have that were crossed? What kind of experiences did they have that opened them up for exploitation? Because we know it's not one step, right?
Hmm.
There's always a process. Uh, we call it grooming, but really it feels like to me that it's just a gradual eroding of the feeling of this is me and that is you.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's so good. Wow, I haven't really thought of it in those terms like that, but that is really good. I mean, how many times do we get a message on our phone that says, "Hi, how are you?" And you have no idea. I haven't gotten one. I must have stopped doing that recently. "Hi, how are you?" on your instant message, and you're like, "I don't know who this is." Someone that's targeting youth will throw out possibly 300 of those, hoping to get 30 responses and possibly meet up with three of those. And so teaching your child how to use this phone, you can't make so many safeguards on a phone. You can't take away phones from kids, necessarily, um but teaching them what happens when you get something like that. What do you do with a message like that, and walking them through that. Or what do you do if the neighbor says, "Hey, come on over here and let's watch a movie," or if Uncle so and so, maybe make some sexual suggestions or comments about a young girl's figure, a niece's figure, a neighbor's figure, or something like that. How do you respond to those? And, I think everybody's boundaries are a little bit different depending on the family that they're raised in. And I think just teaching our kids really strong boundaries at a really young age. I was not taught that. And so I had to learn it as an adult. And
Mhm.
so I would have easily been a target for someone who was looking for someone to groom because I wasn't taught that. And I wish I would have been.
So what cued you in that you didn't have those that teaching for that boundary when you were younger? Was there a time when where it became really obvious that you didn't have those boundaries? I mean, because what I'm talking about is I don't think parents know what that looks like. They
Yeah,
think boundaries is, oh, hand me your phone. You can't go
right,
over there. It's all this harshness
right. Yeah.
that I don't
Yeah.
really think that is helpful, that keeps kids from asking for
Hmm.
help. When we're
Hmm.
really harsh and black and white or all or nothing,
Hmm.
anytime somebody does something like that, anytime there's a white van and
Right.
candy, people are like, oh no, this is terrible. Well, sometimes that's just somebody who's, the ice cream truck.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think for me, I didn't really understand all of this until I became an adult. But when I look at my children, the children that I have raised that are now grown and have their own children, um, it really, us putting boundaries on our kids was really through relationship. I mean, I think probably the strongest boundary, this is a personal story, but one of the strongest boundaries we had. Have you ever watched the show SVU?
Yes, I can't watch
Yes.
it very much.
No, I can't watch that show. I come from a history of abuse in my childhood. And so if that show is on for me, it is really triggering. I don't like it at all. And
No,
so I told my children, when I came upstairs and they were watching that show, and I said, this is what happened, to me as a child. I didn't go into gory details, but I said, this is not something that we glorify. This is not something that we don't need to watch it. We just don't. And I don't want it in my house, and they still to this day talk about that. They remember that, and it meant something to them. But they were a little bit older. But when they were younger, we would just talk about, you know, if something were to happen, if you go to a friend's house. Well, first of all, I never let them spend the night at a friend's house that had older brothers. That might sound really cold, but unless I knew them really well. I just put things in place where I wasn't mean about it. I just didn't. I invited people to our house. We had other solutions, but I just didn't want to put them in a position. Now, if they were, then we would talk about, what do you do in this situation if something happens? You call me and we're gonna walk through it. My son spent the night at one of his friends' house and they watched a movie and they said, "Here's your choices." It was like Friday the 13th and like I don't know, some other, like something about Mary. I mean, like a movie that wasn't scary, but it was definitely inappropriate for a sixth grader. And he, as a as a young kid was like, I didn't want to lose all my friends. And so he chose the one that wasn't scary because he knew what Friday the 13th was about.
Hmm.
And so he, by the end of the night, he called me. He said, "Mom, I'm ready to go home." So we met in the parking lot. He jumped in the car. He's like, "Mom, we gotta go. I feel so violated. I
Oh,
watched this movie. It was really funny."
glad.
Yeah,
I'm so
as
glad
a young
to hear
kid,
that.
yeah, as a young kid, he was able to share those words. I feel violated. But if we didn't have a healthy relationship and we weren't able to talk about things, he would have never called. He would have, never communicated with me what was going on. And it's not like that was a bad family.
Mhm,
They weren't a bad family. It was just that was our boundary
mhm.
and he knew it and that was okay. And
Well, and
so,
he didn't get scared that you were going to call the family and freak out
no,
on the family. He just knew that
no.
you would pull him back
Yeah.
into a safe feeling environment. And that I think that sometimes when we have this all or nothing feeling about stuff, we can get way over responsive so
Yes.
that kids are like, I can't talk to you about my friends. I can't talk to you about the moral issues that are happening to me because if
Right.
I do, I'm not going to have contact with the people that I love, even if they're not great. We need to, you know, we need to find a way to have a balance with that.
Yeah.
So for our family, one of the ways that we taught boundaries, physical boundaries in particular, was we had this habit when we went to grandparents' house, um, and we were leaving. I would say, you have a high five or a hug. That way, the child could get to choose how close they got to grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody in the family. They got to choose a high five or a hug. High fives, that's really fast. And you can be pretty far away, but you're still being respectful and honoring of that relationship without having to be enveloped by an adult who's like 14 times your size.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it was hard to teach our family that that was not disrespectful. Not really hard, but it took a little bit of time. But they understood partially because of the type of work that I do. I started out working with kids who were really, really at risk, and then I worked at a residential treatment center for children who'd been fairly seriously abused and traumatized. And so when you're talking about that, how do we teach our children boundaries? Sometimes it's just that simple. And then, when they had friends over, I was the mom who said, okay, so we have a safe word. If you guys ever feel uncomfortable or you feel like you need some help, just tell me peanut. And they're like, what's a safe word? And
I
I'm
don't
like, well, this is just
understand.
how this works here. And it was, but I think it was helpful for my kids to know that because now they do talk to me about all kinds of things
Mhm.
that if they weren't talking to me about it, who would they be asking for help on figuring out some of these really sticky wickets that we get ourselves into? My friend needs a ride, and what do I do to get them a ride? And it's just difficult. And so I want them to always come to me and say, "Hey, my friend needs help," or and I want to teach the parents that I'm working with how to be that person that could be the helper
Mhm.
without enabling bad things. And so it's helping people find a balance. And
Mhm.
I think that's what boundaries do is they help us to find a balance between connecting and then saying, wait a second, that's not me. You right? There are some people who are just not huggers who don't want to be touched or
Mhm.
who at times don't want to be touched.
Mhm.
So it's really important to teach our families that um, there was a there's a time period where one of my children didn't want someone touching the top of their head, and there was a family member who did that a lot. And so we have all these pictures with one of the kids on either side of this child when we were around this family member, kind of providing a physical boundary, and they didn't even know it that they were doing that to help the other child. And it was just great because we had talked about, hey, I don't like it when so and so touches the top of my head.
That's
Um,
funny.
so it was just nice that we all kind of worked together as a family to really support them. And I
Hmm.
think that's kind of why I like Refuge for Women. When I come back to why do I work with the women that I work with them because they have a huge need to overcome some of the trauma that they have. But I can't reach that trauma if they aren't in a safe environment where they're learning boundaries, where they've got people who are watching for them to have a hard day and knows what to do for them when they have that hard day.
Hmm.
When I'm working with women from Refuge for Women, the first 6 months is all about their childhood. It's
Hmm.
all about their childhood and how those relationships went and what was dysfunctional and what functioned and what were their positives, what were their negatives, what did they learn.
Hmm.
And they cannot do that if they're living on their own and still in the life. And I think I just appreciate the depth of the work that I can do with your clients because of the safety that your ladies provide.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I have a one of our graduates, one of our first graduates she actually graduated from our Kentucky location. She's now an executive director at one of our locations.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
just was looking at her Facebook page yesterday, and I was like, I commented on it. And so today I wrote down a quote from her. But she was introduced into this life through the porn industry, and I love her. She said, when we are out there teaching our daughters to not talk to strangers, let's take a close look at who else she might be in a relationship with. Even the most celebrated women in porn, when I was there in these types of relationships, if we are going to be against trafficking, we might do well to understand how it's connected. So what she's saying is that, we need to look at all the different relationships that our children are in, not just, the strangers. And then we need to look at how porn is connected to that type of a lifestyle. And so, and just being open and honest and being able to talk about those things, and so that your children, disciplining your children teaches them self-discipline. If there's no boundaries and everything's a free for all, I mean, then you're not teaching them either. And if there's boundaries are so strict, you're not you don't have relationship. And so, there's a happy medium there. But yeah, I think the main thing is it's not the strangers in the van. It's all those relationships, and it's good to teach them about those.
I don't know the statistics, but most of the women that I've worked with over the last 5 or 6 years at Refuge, they had boundary violations when they were young by a
Hmm.
family member.
Hmm. For
And
sure.
um, I can't think of an exception, um, which just prepared them for being forced, coerced, or having fraud used against them in order to gain their sexual
Absolutely. Hmm.
exploitation. And
It's
so
so connected.
I just
It's
think
so
it's important
connected.
for us to all know what that means. Before the age of 18, you actually don't have to have coercion, fraud, or anything like that, just exploitation for sexual contact. And I think that's important because, the children that I work with are many times at risk. And
Mhm.
so we need to remember that it doesn't have to be overt, just has to be, for some reason, somebody taller or with a lower voice or older or even just cooler. They don't have to have lots of more power, but kids will do what they're told or what's expected of them
Mhm.
quite a bit. And so we want to create independent thinkers and people who know, wait a second, that doesn't feel right. I think I
Yeah.
better hold
Yeah.
back.
I remember my daughter, she was young, and there was someone that was very, very, very close to us. We spent a lot of time with them. And I just didn't feel comfortable letting her stay ever. And their daughter stayed with us all the time. And I just never felt comfortable. And so finally I relented and was gonna let her stay. And she's like, Mom, I just don't feel safe there. And, just that was good. That felt so good to me. But it was because we had that relationship. We were able to talk about it. She felt comfortable telling me that, and I didn't, why not? What's going on? Tell me I just, I was like, okay, good.
You
Then my
trust
instincts were right. My
you
instincts were
trusted
right.
her.
So let's not do that anymore. Yeah.
I think trusting our children's gut instincts is
Hmm.
really important.
Hmm.
And teaching them to do the same is important as well.
Yeah.
Well, Christine, thank you so much for spending some time with me on this Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We're going to go ahead and end the program right now, but I'm going to put into this links to to contact Refuge for Women. You guys need support, prayer, volunteers, and financial support. I'm going to put contacts for C7 Human Trafficking Coalition because we support those who support people who are coming out of trafficking. And then I'm going to also give some more information on boundaries using some of the programs that Acorn has out there. So hopefully this will be really helpful to parents and other people who work with kids. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.